This week on the show, how reading a famous Greek classic can help in the advertising industry. And we'll find out how the White House press corps really works. A warm welcome to Mags on Media. Good to have you with us. First up this week, in order to survive the onslaught of competing media, radio has to keep reinventing itself. A perspective now on something called pop-up radio. From James O'Brien of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. He was in South Africa for the annual Radio Days conference at Wits University.
Pop-up radio stations have two forms, and at least they have so far in Australia. We've had digital radio in Australia now since 2009, and since that's happened, we've had all this extra spectrum where we could start to play. So one of the stations we've set up in Australia is being called ABC Extra, part of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and we're using it for a whole range of things. So we're doing musical anniversaries, we're doing historical anniversaries. We set up a station for a week, and then we switch it off. The other area in which we've been doing them in Australia is actually in those parts of Australia where we don't have digital radio yet. And what we're doing is we're going into communities in need. In the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a couple of major disasters in Australia. These are really small communities, maybe 200 people. So they wouldn't justify a radio station normally. But since they're devastated and since they need help in recovering and they need some sort of communication, what we're doing as the Australian Broadcasting Corporation is going into those communities and setting up a radio station for 6 months.
Serves a very specific need for a very specific cause. Move in, move out and move on to something else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there an opportunity here for you to cozy up to advertisers?
Not for the ABC.
I mean, I know
not for the ABC.
You are proudly advert-free.
We certainly are.
We're not.
Okay, look,
this is a commercial entity.
Where I think it has actually happened in Australia that the commercial sector has done these pop-up stations. There's a couple of interesting things. Every year, the commercial radio stations in Australia do Christmas music. So they actually buy they make programs that shops can play Christmas music without having to find CDs themselves. I think the other areas where you could start to investigate this from a commercial perspective would be a music festival, for example. So if there's a big folk festival or a jazz festival or something like that.
Lends itself perfectly too, doesn't it?
R. Kelly is coming to South Africa, I see, in a couple of months' time. You know, I give away the idea, maybe his managers should talk to some people about doing some sort of deal for that.
Probably unfair to ask you. You've parachuted in, not literally, but for this Radio Days conference hosted by Wits University. Have you had an opportunity to listen to some of our radio output in this country?
Look, I've listened to a little bits and pieces. I mean, the most interesting thing I've found was to actually listen to some of the stations in language, because you know, Australia is mostly an English language broadcasting country, even though we have some foreign language broadcasting in about 30 different languages. To actually hear some of the programs in different languages I found is really interesting. I was in a cab the other day and I was listening to a radio station with a cab driver and I understood not a single word, and then I heard Mandela. What did he say? What did he say? So I found that really interesting. I would also make an observation that I thought the musical variety evident in the stations here is greater than we have in commercial radio in Australia. Commercial radio in Australia tends to be the same music on most stations, whereas here I heard greater diversity, which I think is a good thing.
We've just had the launch of here in the Gauteng province of a new commercial talk station. I think commercial talk, does it still have relevance in terms of the media mix?
Well, I can tell certainly in Australia that commercial talk is number one in every Australian capital city, and the reason why they are successful in this era of, you know, the iPod and MP3 players and streaming music and all that sort of stuff is because they're live and they're local and they still talk directly to an audience. So that's why I think talk radio has great potential to survive what's happening in the broader radio context.
And the secret hasn't changed. It's about striking the right tonality, it's the light and shade, but it's also about having relevant and big opinion, isn't
Absolutely. Look, it is. Certainly in commercial talk radio that's the case. At the ABC we've taken a different approach, and that is much more down the line. The other approach that we've also taken is to make sure there's some humour in there. You know, a lot of talk radio is angry man saying angry things to angry people. And you know, you wake up in the morning.
Yeah,
and you think,
give us a break.
Give us a break. Make me laugh. You know. So when you talk about those big issues, you want to laugh from time to time as well, I think.
Fascinating stuff. The views there of James O'Brien of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. So, does the concept have space, resonance in the South African radio landscape, I wonder? The conversation is already up and running on our Facebook page on this address. And coming up on the programme, the poor cousin of advertising is getting a makeover.
News that moves. ENCA.com.